Welcome to another edition of the Backyard Professor videos. I'm Kerry Schertz, the Backyard Professor. In the symposium that Truman Madsen conducted, and the proceedings were printed in the Reflections on Mormonism, Judeo-Christian Parallels, the phenomenal New Testament scholar Krister Standahl did a study on the Sermon on the Mount and 3rd Nephi. His analysis deserves close attention. I'm going to summarize it because all I can make is a 10-minute video here. However, this is a phenomenal study by one of the world's foremost New Testament scholars, Krister Standahl. He focuses on the heart of hearts in the Book of Mormon, 3rd Nephi, and he compares it with the book of Matthew, the Sermon on the Mount. 3rd Nephi, he shows, is less like the Synoptic Gospels than it is like the 4th Gospel. That book is differently ordered and focuses and heightens the divine quality of Christ's ministry. Stendahl approaches 3rd Nephi as a Targum, a kind of a timeless apocryphon. Sections of it overlap the biblical record, and other sections fill in and intensify the biblical record. Overall, 3rd Nephi Christologizes. It claims for Christ more than that he is just a teacher in conflict with some of the versions of Judaism of his day. He is a Savior coming in his own name. Christ, not his interpreters, is at center stage in the last 23 chapters of the book. The portrait of Christ that emerges is more than a Jewish revolutionary. He is the Redeemer and the Revelator in the midst of a beautifully responsive community. Stendahl's analysis, I want to just read a couple of items of interest. Page 151 in this fine text. Let me summarize my observations, he says, by saying that the image of Jesus in the whole of 3rd Nephi, and even more in the portion given in the Sermon on the Mount, is that of a revealer, stressing faith in me rather than what is right according to God's will for his people and his creation. Jesus is not any longer a teacher in the ongoing community of God's people correcting the foibles and the misconceptions of religious people. Let me exemplify that in a very precise manner. During the symposium, W.D. Davies stated, and this is another very fine biblical scholar that was in this symposium as well with the Mormons, W.D. Davies stated that there is no other Christian community or community out of the Judeo-Christian tradition which has as positive and non-anti-Semitic ways of speaking about the Jews as have the Mormons. I found his case convincing. In my own observations, I've noticed that the word Pharisee does not occur in the Book of Mormon. The Christian habit of using the term Pharisee as a symbol for the wrong attitude toward God is not a part of the Mormon tradition. That is truly refreshing and welcome and unique. Let me turn to the next page. Page 152, he says, let me summarize my observations. I have spoken out of the kind of perspective with which biblical scholars look at biblical texts at 3rd Nephi. I have applied standard methods of historical critics, redaction criticism, and genre criticism. From such perspectives, it seems very clear that the Book of Mormon belongs to and shows many of the typical signs of the Targums and the pseudepigraphic recasting of biblical materials. The Targumic tendencies are those of clarifying and actualizing translations, usually by expansion and more specific application to the need and situation of the community. The pseudepigraphic, both the apocalyptic and the didactic, tend to fill out the gaps in our knowledge about sacred events and truths and predictions. They may be overtly revelatory or under the authority of the ancient greats, Enoch, the patriarchs, the apostles, or in the case of the Essenes under the authority of the teacher of righteousness in a community which referred to its members as Latter-day Saints. Such are in the style and the thematic vocabulary of the biblical writings. It is obvious to me that the Book of Mormon stands within both of these traditions if considered as a phenomenon of religious texts. I would further see the Book of Mormon as an exponent of one of the striking tendencies in pseudepigraphic literature. I refer to the hunger for further revelation, the insatiable hunger for knowing more than has been revealed so far. And he says on page 154, he says, Matthew reads, Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, Matthew 5:6. In the Book of Mormon, the saying has moved away from both the hunger of the stomach and the thirst for justice to the righteous realm of the spirit, 3 Nephi 12:6. And there is nothing wrong in that. It is our common Christian tradition and experience to widen and deepen the meaning of holy words. In his careful criticism, in his methodology, in his using the textual tools that biblical scholars have developed, by his using that on 3 Nephi and comparing it on the Sermon on the Mount, he didn't find the book 3 Nephi in the Book of Mormon to be phony. He didn't find it to be lacking in spiritual content or devoid of any meaning. He found it a genuine, powerful text. He carefully explores the differences and the similarities. His study, I highly recommend it. He's the gentleman who, and he just recently passed away, darn it. I'm sorry. I was sorry to hear that when I heard that, but he lived a wonderful full life. He gave us fabulous expositions of the Scriptures. He was a good and great man. His analysis of other religious traditions, his theme was holy envy. Take the best out of all the religious traditions and compare that. See what value there is in other religious traditions. He did that with 3 Nephi at this symposium with stunning effect. He found it very unique, worthwhile, and very spiritually uplifting, especially about what it teaches about Jesus Christ and its non-anti-Semitic character. This argument that we Mormons are biased toward the Book of Mormon, and so we will always find the good and ignore the bad, that the Book of Mormon has no archaeological value, that it is bereft of spiritual reality and hope. This argument against the Book of Mormon is simply false.